Hello, I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and welcome to Surviving Bad, where we explore Iowa stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. Today we'll discuss loved ones, elderly care, and isolation. Our guest, Denise Bridges, is going to share a very personal story about a special relationship with her mother and the challenge of caring and loving during the pandemic. Denise is highly respected as a prevention specialist, as a mentor for youth, and serves as president of the African American Family Resiliency Association. And there's a lot more, especially when it comes to caring for loved ones. Let's get to know Denise Bridges. Hello, Denise. Welcome to the show.
Hello. How are you?
Good. Tell us a bit about yourself, the journey that led you here, and the kind of things that you do.
Okay. I am an only child. I should say that first. I have a mother. I had a mother, I should say, and she became ill, and eventually she ended up in a care facility. I'm here today to talk about that because the more and more I see that the care centers have not been open, and there are people in there. I just think of all the people that are sitting in those care centers without anyone coming to see them because they're not allowed to have visitors, and just maybe not getting phone calls, not getting a whole lot of things. And so I think about the process of what I had to go through and how I had to become more creative to be able to connect with my mom. So what I say is that I was caring for a loved one in a fishbowl. Because if you think about a fish in a fishbowl, we all just look at them and say, oh, he's pretty, but we cannot touch them. And that's sort of like what happened with me, having my mom in a fishbowl.
So now, it was a situation where she was in a nursing care facility?
Yes, my mother was, I had my mom at home with me, but because I am the only child, it becomes a very difficult situation when she needs care. And she needed care 24 hours because if she had to go to the bathroom or she had to be on oxygen, different things, her blood pressure would drop low. You have to raise the bed up. It was a lot to it. Eventually, I did have a caretaker for her that I paid privately, but it becomes very, very expensive. And depending on the insurance that the person themselves has, it did not allow me to have another person in here or for me to keep paying for what I was paying for my mother's care. Again, I'm married, but it's not real good for a son-in-law to have to take care of his mother-in-law with her personal needs, but I needed someone else to help me. Eventually, my mom's doctor, who was her heart doctor, he looked at me one day and he says, I don't know which one of you are the patient, you or your mother, because I was getting worn out with taking care of my mom. And he said she needs to be, and she was at that point where she would be home for about a week and then she was rushed to the hospital and she stayed 2 or 3 days and she was back, or 4 or 5 days, and was backwards and forward. He said she needs to be put in a care center because basically she was not going to get any better. And that's how I ended the way how my mom ended up in a care center.
Well, and that's nothing wrong with that because parents need care at some point in time. Now, it must have been an interesting switch for you where you work so hard to help other families deal with crises and situations, and then at the same time find yourself in not just the care facility part, which normally is fine, but now we have COVID.
Absolutely. And still working my programs that I have because doing that, I also have a girls group that I was teaching a self-love class, which deal with anger management and different things during the time COVID. We were doing it on Zoom. So I was doing Zooms, I was doing my meetings on Zooms, and then still running over to the care center. I went to the care center every day. Before they did not allow my mom to have visitors, I actually visited my mother twice a day, plus prepared a meal for my mom and brought it in.
Well, I'd like to hear more about how that process went when COVID did happen. We'll take a short break and we'll continue the conversation with Denise. We'll see you all after the break. You don't want to miss this.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Every second, 127 new devices connect to the internet. You can feel it happening. Our digital world expanding with every breath. We're entering a whole new era of connectivity, and Mediacom will be ready to power it with one of the nation's first 10G platforms. We'll be bringing you more speed, more capacity, more security, and the power to do more than you ever dreamed possible.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. We're talking with Denise Bridges about caring, love, and the challenges we face staying connected with our loved ones, especially when they're in a care facility. Now, Denise, your mom was dealing with heart issues. She had to go to a care facility, and after she was there for a while, all of a sudden we have COVID. And you had this wonderful regimen to be with your mom plenty and bring her meals. Boy, how did that world change for you when that came into play?
Well, it changed drastically for me. For number one, my mom was a very picky eater, and and so a lot of stuff she didn't like, and she liked her food hot. And I hate to say it, but in the care centers, their food is not usually very hot. And so with me bringing it over, they allowed me to heat up her food and stuff, so her food was hot, and she really truly enjoyed that. And the fact that my mom actually lived with me for 19 years in my home. And she spent about 10 years bouncing backwards and forwards to Kentucky because her granddaughter and her great-grand lived there. And she would go down there and stay and visit. And at that time, she was able to, get around. So she was down there with them, giving them love. So when my mom was, and actually this COVID thing happened so fast because I had went to see my mother the night before, and we had a long talk because she enjoyed the fact that I would come in so often to see her and we'd talk. And I told my mom I would see her late the next day because I had a meeting to attend. And when I went over there that night, I didn't get over there till about 8 p.m., which was unusual. I didn't get there during the daytime. And they said Mommy was asleep. And I walked in her room and she was asleep. And so I didn't bother to wake her up. The next day when I went, they called me and said I could not come in because they had to shut down the care center. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't get to prepare her or whatever. So I went over, my mom did not have a phone in her room. That was another problem. I had given her, she had a cell phone, her cell phone broke. We gave her another cell phone. She couldn't seem to operate that one. I ended up getting a jitterbug. She couldn't get that done. During the process, she called 911. The police came out to the care center. They didn't even know she had a phone. So I had to take the phone back, but it was like trying to communicate in all of this. And I should say prior to this, before that happened, my mother had just celebrated her birthday. So we had a big birthday celebration at the care center. So she did get an opportunity to have a birthday before COVID set in. And then it was like, what do I do? How do I explain it to her why I could not come in? Now that was something. It was like, I didn't have any idea. And then finally, I realized there was a window, and where her room was, she wasn't next to the window. She had a roommate at that time who was at that window, but my mother could be wheeled over to the window. And then that started that process of us talking through the window. And that was a big challenge because number one, she couldn't hear real well, okay? So I'm yelling. I'm quite sure everybody in the parking lot probably heard me, the conversations, and I'm trying to explain COVID to her. One thing that I used to always do is my mother was a big reader and loved reading the newspapers. So the care center said that I could bring over anything that was packaged. So that meant like I could get like muffins or pies. She could get her Gatorade, or she could get a small can of ginger ale, stuff like that. But it had to sit outside. I mean, you could take it into like a little foyer, a little area, not inside the building, but outside. It was a little room outside of going into the main entrance because that was locked. And you could leave it and mark it. Now, sometimes that food wouldn't get to her to probably whatever. You know, they said 24 hours. And then I would give her a newspaper. And I would say, Mom, read because it's telling you about this, what's going on. But the problem was my mother, prior to going in, had cataract surgery. She needed to go back to get some corrections. So she really wasn't seeing well. So then that became a problem. Her TV in her care center in her room did not work properly. I had them several times to go in, but I know for the fact, because I was in her room, that TV never worked. So that didn't work. So Mom began to have isolation because they would put the TV on and just leave it on. I brought a radio over to them. They never did put the radio on because my concern was she needed to hear some type of sound. You cannot live day in and day out with no sound. And so it was like, what can I do? And I bought neon paper, bright poster boards, and I wrote big signs, and I would howl through, and then I would have these signs up to tell her what I was saying, and I would tell her to read, and she would lean in, and she would start reading the signs that I would have, and I would tell her about the COVID. When I talked to her, I wouldn't have my mask on, but I showed her that I had to wear a mask, and I told her everybody had to wear these masks. And I told her how dangerous it was and that people were dying. And she was was really confused until my grandson came in town, and he stayed with us for about 2 or 3 months. When he came in town, he wore the mask, and it register, and it was like, everybody has to wear a mask. And I'm telling her everybody had to read the mask. So I would tell her every day that so many people were dying, and that it was very, very scary, and that I couldn't come in because her thing was, why can't you come in? And I said, you have to be safe. And I would tell her that she was getting this test. And I know that wasn't, pleasant, because every Monday they would give her a test, and by Wednesday we would find out if she had COVID. Very, very difficult. And it just was like, how can you be creative? One of the ways that I found that's very creative, especially if they can read and stuff, is I went to the dollar store and bought up all of the cards that you could think of that say, stay well, inspiration cards. And I would write a private message in there telling her what was going on in my house so that she could read. So the connection. So that's one thing that you can do if somebody's in there. Then it was like, how can I start with music? And I'll talk to you in the next segment about how we can talk about music and how that helped.
Let's take a little break, a short break for everybody to take a breath. And when we come back, we'll look at some very sensitive and important issues when you're caring for a loved one in a time of COVID. See you all after the break.
While a lot is changing in our world, at Mediacom, our focus remains the same, making sure you have the fastest, most reliable connection possible. During this critical time, we know your needs are changing. You may be working or learning from home, relying on telemedicine, or finding new ways to keep everyone entertained. If you need more speed, call or go online, and Mediacom will double your speed immediately for as low as $10 more a month for 1 year. Right now, millions of people and billions of devices are connected to the internet. Homes, businesses, hospitals, schools. The security and reliability of these connections are more important than ever. That's why at Mediacom, we've built a network to protect them. A network that sees threats, fixes problems before they occur, and keeps you going with 99.99% network reliability.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and we're talking with Denise Bridges. We're looking at some very sensitive, important, and sometimes end-of-life issues. Denise, we left off on music. Let's start with music. How did music play a part in this for you?
Well, I know that my mother truly enjoyed listening to music. She liked to hear Christian music. She was a big jazz lover. And I was really thinking, how could I liven things up for my mom? So what really helped me was while my grandson was there, my mother leaned in the window and said that she wanted her grandson to do this dance. And it was the floss. And that's just, that just skyrocket that little dance. And so my grandson says, I can't do that dance. And so we got in front of my mother's window and we flossed, both of us together. And my mother was so excited about that. She began to move her wheelchair like she was trying to do a movement. And I thought, okay. So then I went home and I thought, I've got to be able to think of how to get music to my mom. So one way that we decided was we purchased a landline in my mom's room. They hooked the landline not in the right place, but they would wheel her over there. And then I would take 2 cell phones with me. So I would have the care center to put it on the landline on speaker. I would have one cell phone that I would talk to, and the other one would play music. So then I would go to YouTube and pick out Christian music, a song or something that she would like, and I'd hold the 2 cell phones together so the sound would echo in her room. And then I would find maybe a minister of some sort to give a prayer or whatever, and we hold those up, and she would hear a sermon. Then occasionally her caretaker, who loved to sing and loved to pray, would also come over and do that in front of the window with the mic. So we set up our own private microphones. And so she would hear the music. And, one day she just cried because she was enjoying it so much. So music is really something that can help people.
That's just an amazing thing that you were so persistent in looking for ways to engage her.
Right.
Things like that. Now, that had to have an effect on the other workers there. Did you see a lot of stuff like that happening with other people?
No, I didn't. You know what? The whole time that I was over there with my mom, and I was there from January, my mother passed in July. I take that back. I've seen one person that was actually on the other side, and she was visiting somebody, and she was at the window, and they just had the cards up. But I remember one of the workers stopped me, and she said, I just want to compliment you on doing this. She said, I know how much you used to come to see your mother inside, and for you to stand out here and talk to your mom. And some days it was snowing and it was cold, and then it turned hot, but I would still be out there. The only time that I was not in front of my mother's window is when it was extremely cold. And I should tell you this, in order to do this, I would have to call the care center. And a lot of times they wouldn't answer the phone right away, but I keep persisting and tell them, hey, I'm right outside my mom's window. Please bring her to the window.
That's fantastic. Hey, can we take a short break and then have you share some advice for other people that might be going through what you went through? That'd be fantastic. We're going to invite Denise back to share some final comments and good advice. You don't want to miss this. See you after the break.
I don't know how we would have survived without Mediacom. We have 5 kids, my wife and I, and we have Mediacom for all of our internet and all of our cable services. So I'm stuck in my house, but at the same time, I'm connected to people all over the world, and it's been fantastic.
Thanks to Mediacom, I've had reliable internet to continue to work business as usual, so that I can continue to provide for myself and my family.
Right now, we all feel like the world is in a standstill. The internet has played a huge role in allowing us to stay connected to our jobs and the kids' schooling online and finding fun and creative ways to stay connected with the ones that we love. We couldn't do it without Mediacom.
Today, more than ever, you need fast, reliable internet. At Mediacom, we want you to know you can count on us. Our fiber-powered 100% gigabit technology network was built for the future. We have enormous capacity and power and 99.99% network reliability. So even though these are uncertain times, we're prepared. And you can be certain we'll keep your world connected.
Today on Surviving Bad, we're taking a moment to talk about finding hope and inspiration in the face of a life-changing event. And we're going to listen to some advice from Denise and information that may make a difference in someone's life and in the life of someone you love. Denise, how about some pointers and tips for people dealing with a change like that in their lives?
Well, one thing I would say is please be in tune to your loved ones being in the care center. Watch the changes that happens to them. So if you're at the window, in my situation, I began to see my mother decline. Because I see my mother decline, what I noticed was that due to COVID, they would bring the meals into their room and they would leave them. But sometimes the trays wouldn't line up with the person, and if they had some disability as far as eating, they struggle. I watched my mother 9 times trying to put just one piece of a forkful of pie in her mouth. And finally, I got on the phone and called them and said, please go to my mother's room and bring her wheelchair closer to her tray so that she's able to eat. This is something that you have to really stay on them. I realize they're overworked or whatever, but sometimes those kind of things. Also pay attention to them. Like my mom would be cold. She was cold because maybe they went in the closet and got one of her thinner nightgowns instead of something warmer for her to put on, or clothing. So that's some advice that I would tell you. Number 2 is just, tell them something funny. Tell them something funny to make them laugh. My mom looking at me trying to do this dance was funny to her. Or sometimes one day she looked at me and she said, you look bad. And I'm like, why? And I'm looking at my clothes. Am I not dressed? But I was tired and she could tell. And she told me, go home. So be in tune with your loved ones because they still want to know that if they love you a lot, they want to know that they're still taking care of you. And so in my mom's mind, she was like, she needs to go home. She needs to rest, whatever. So that's really important. And the other thing that I want to say too is that being a minority is very, very hard to put a loved one in a facility because it is naturally our culture to keep our loved ones home and take care of them. But there's a time when all of us cannot. And so then you live with that guilt of I should have, could have, or whatever. And so for me, it was like I don't have any family here in Iowa. It's just my husband and I, and then it was my mom. So it made it very difficult. And I had to build a line of friendship with people who became my caretakers with me. And that's important that I would tell you to reach out to your friends and say, hey, I need your help. And they helped me because they would often would stop by, or they would send cards to my mom while she was in the care center. And that lets them know that other people care about them too. So that's very important to remember.
Yeah, I know. I grew up as the son of immigrants, and in our families, the loved ones stayed with the family till the last possible moment. And like you were saying, when they needed a care facility, and there's a lot of good reasons for needing it. Everybody felt guilty.
Yeah.
It was tough. And I'm sure that people being in isolation doesn't reduce the guilt because you can't get to them as much. What would you tell somebody? I mean, is there something you, as a person, when your time comes, that you would need to tell your kids it's time to put me there, or is that just not something that happens? I mean, is it something as we grow older that we need to do for our kids to give them that permission?
Absolutely. And in my case, I have an only child too. So we've already had that talk. When I cannot take care of myself, I said, you need to place me in a care facility. What I did ask her to do was please try to visit me at least once a week, if that's all possible. Maybe try to put me closer to where you're living at or something where you can. Please check on me, make sure that they're taking good care of me. And I think I'm more cautious, maybe aware than most people, is that in 2018, I was in a serious car crash. And it was in Kentucky, and I wasn't able to walk, and I had to learn how to walk again and all those good things. So I was laid up for a long time. And so knowing what it takes for caregivers to take care of you is very, very important. And you need to talk to them about them. Tell them that certain things you're just not able to do. Don't let everybody ride you and make you feel guilty, because I had people who said, you really need to keep your mother at home, and they're not going to take care of her right, and you're going to have to. And so that rides on you. You're already feeling guilty, and but you have to look beyond that. What do I need to survive myself, as well as taking care of the caretaker?
Those are great points. I really thank you for joining us today, because we all talk about our healthcare providers and elderly care providers as heroes, but you know what? Moms and daughters and sons can be heroes too. And thank you for what you've shared today. I know it's brave. It hasn't been that long. And
thank you.
Thank you all for joining us today. You can go to our website at ahealthyiowa.org for more information. Keep an eye on Mediacom MC22 for our next episode of Surviving Bad, where we explore Iowa's stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. On Mediacom MC22, your local programming leader.